Hi, this is MTV214. Thanks for stopping by the channel. Thanks to subscribers new and old. This is the book by Charles Dickens, who wrote A Christmas Carol. Who doesn't know that book and made into a lot of movies? It's Great Expectations. This was published in 1861. I'm not sure if it's before or after the Christmas Carol, which he's most famous for. Like, there's lots of movies of that. This is another story, not Christmas related. This actually book reminded me of Les Miserables, which I have down there, which is a lot longer, but a sort of similar story in some ways. So in it, it's about the boy Pip, which is his nickname for Philip. And it starts off kind of sad. Things in the 1800s weren't that happy with like Les Miserables, Frankenstein, and a lot of other books back then. It's a lot of like sadness and death. But life isn't easy. It was tougher back then than it is now. But in it, it starts off with Pip that he's with one of his like older sisters who's like raising him because he's just a little kid, and her husband Joe, and because his parents had passed away, and like I think it's about 5 of his siblings have already passed as well, and it's about like his life. His brother isn't really educated. He's like a blacksmith. The sister takes care of the home, and there's also has like a servant that helps them around the house as well. The sister seems to have like PTSD and some other like mental problems with she's like very stressed out and like lashes out at family about different things and speaks down to Pip. Joe is always kind to him though, and like is really like a good friend to him, but things like you'll go on and that there's this woman in the town that's like a rich old woman and like asks to see Pip to come to his house. So he goes there as a child, and like he sees this girl that's like heard the old lady is Miss Havisham's adopted daughter Stella, as well as her, and they play a card game and talk, and like he feels like love at first sight with the girl, and she sort of like talks down to him and doesn't think well of him, but it gets him the idea like he wants to elevate his status in life and be better, and like work his way up in society, be a gentleman and different things. And a sort of like side story in this is that there's the police go to their house one evening. It's around Christmas, and that to have the help of the blacksmith Joe to like about fixing handcuffs, so or like examining them. So he like helps with that, and then that him and Joe and another family friend go to see what's going on with the police, and it's like there are two escaped convicts who are like fighting each other, and one of them before had asked Pip for help. So like Pip had brought him some food and different, and like didn't kept it secret about stuff. So he's sort of scared of the convict. It's like, oh, this convict is gonna think that I told on him and like said where he is, but that wasn't so. But the two convicts like have a fight and then like get arrested, and what goes on is some time passes, and that Pip is starting to be the apprentice to Joe as a blacksmith, and that he's at a few times like called to by Miss Havisham, the rich old lady, to go and visit her and like play cards and talk, and like he goes about her property like sort of dilapidated in some ways, like she's like old and sort of bitter about that, like lost the love of her life, and that's why he has like Estella as like adopted daughter, try and like help her out in life. And so then like he finds out that someone is going to be his benefactor, and like support him, give him money so he can, like, get an education and go to London, different things. So like he has money to spend to buy a new pair of nice clothes and different things. He does that, and when he like shows money to the shopkeeper, then he's like given like better treatment. But he goes to England, and like he's studying. He makes some friends, and like one of them is actually the lawyer of Miss Havisham, and his name is Mr. Jaggers. So like meets up with him, and then he's put into the care of like a family, and I'm pretty sure that family is related to Miss Havisham, that like cousins. I don't remember exactly, but different things happen with that, and like he gets money, and like he sort of grows to be ashamed of his sister and his brother-in-law Joe. So like but he like makes his own friends. He sort of feels bad about that. He still thinks of Estella, and like wants to be a gentleman, like to be with her. But different things go on. She actually ends up marrying someone else, and like he goes to visit Miss Havisham, and also goes back home that his sister was like injured, and then she's like well, actually it happens before that. She's injured, and then like she can't really talk after. She has brain damage of some sort. But time goes on, and then like she passes, so he goes to visit home more in the country in England, and then goes back, and like his brother-in-law doesn't like speak to him or treat him the same as used to. Could like say old chap and Pip, and like be kind to him, and he's saying sir. So like okay, that like you're better, you're higher than we have to speak to you, like yes sir, like you're someone higher. But and that sort of bothers Pip, because like oh, like it's Joe that knew him his most of his life and was such a good friend to him. And like things go on. He gets a surprise that like his benefactor comes to visit. It's actually the the convict from years ago, who actually like thought well of him as a boy, and like wanted to thank him, and like was kicked out of England, and was in Australia working, and like working diligently, saving money, and he used that money to send to give to Pip so he can become a gentleman. So it's like he has all this money, and then he's sort of surprised to see him, and like oh, like he remembers him from when he was from years ago. But this is that convict, and the convict like explains to himself like that he's done bad, but then he like was gone working hard to make his life better, and like to not for himself, but to like give it to Pip, sort of like adopts Pip in a way to make a gentleman out of him. And Pip is worried because like he's like an ex-convict, and like he was kicked out of England, and then he came back, and like Pip is trying to find a way to get him out of England with his friend Herbert's help. And he also wants to help his friend Herbert, that's like looking to make his way up in the world, and he sort of helps pay the way for him to get work. But then with his name is Provost, is like his like Magwitch is the convict's real name, but he goes by the name Provost to sort of like hide himself, have an alias. And Pip wants to get him out of the country so he doesn't get in problems, and like it makes Pip's life harder, because like he doesn't have more money coming in to pay it, and he doesn't want to accept it because like knows it's from the convict. He thought it was from Miss Havisham, of like how he was visiting her in the past, but it wasn't her. He was surprised, and like he was told oh, like it's a secret. But then he finds out when he go that the convict come back to see him, and like wants to see his gentleman that he made. But things are difficult, and they have some problems to try and get him out. And what happens is the police see the ex-convict Provost, and like he's like fighting with someone, and he gets injured, and then he's arrested. Pip like owes gratitude to him for what he's done, so like stays by his side at like with prison, and then in a hospital, and like Provost's health is like getting worse and worse, and he passes on. But he hopes that, like, you know, Pip sort of, that there are some redeeming factors in him to, like, you know, want to, like, doesn't just think of himself, thinks of Pip to want to make his life better. And how he gets sick himself, and that he owes all these debts that he can't really pay, so he like sells things and has collection. So that's why, like, he was gonna be arrested, but he was like sick himself, and then Joe goes to visit him and help take care of him, and he like finds out when he's like, you know, doing better, he can get out of bed and go out and stuff, that it's actually Joe paid back his debts that he owed. And then Joe takes the journey back to his hometown, like, you know, there is not thought of well there. Goes home, they don't think of him too well there, but he goes to Joe and says, like, you know, he'll pay him back, and he's sort of like saddened because he wanted to go with the servant girl with of like Joe and his sister that is still helping Joe, and they're actually, that was their wedding day, so like, you know, he puts on like a happy face, and that, like, you know, is happy for them, that they're a great couple, like the best husband and the best wife, and that he says that he'll pay them back. And then he goes to work, and like he's working with his friend Herbert that he actually like secretly helped, and his friend Herbert gets married, but he's still single. And like, you know, years go by, it's like 11 years later, and he goes back to visit Joe and Biddy, who's like, you know, his wife, Joe's wife, and sees that they have a son and a daughter, and like the son was named after Pip, and like, you know, is in his old stool at the house. And then he goes to where like Miss Havisham had her house. It's actually, I didn't mention, but there was a fight that like Miss Havisham was really upset about Estella getting married, because she was sort of going against the wishes of Miss Havisham. And then, like, you know, she loved Estella, but like Estella did what she wanted and feels sort of betrayed, and then has a fight with Pip, and like there's a fire, and she gets really burned and he gets burned in his arm, so like he had his time of healing, and then different stuff goes on. It's also actually more complicated than this. There's also like other family aspects, that Pip finds out that the daughter, that Estella is actually the daughter of that convict and the lawyer's, Mr. Jagger's servant, is the mother of the girl Estella, and like, you know, not of the adopted daughter of the rich Miss Havisham. So there's like a family aspect of like family being torn apart and different things. The book sort of reminds you of Les Miserables, that like there's complications with family in it, and it's sort of like a story of like doing the wrong thing and redemption, because like Pip feels bad over what he's done, like, you know, mistreating and not wanting to see Joe and his sister after, like, you know, has a benefactor and is being made into a gentleman. He's sort of like ashamed of his roots, but he learns lessons the hard way, that like, you know, he's humbled by what happens, and like, you know, he's on his way up in the world, and then he's like crashed back down, but not all the way down, because he was like working at a bank with his friend Herbert and becomes partner after some years. So he does learn and is humbled by his experiences in life, but at the end he goes and sees his like the what used to be the house of Miss Havisham. It's just empty lot now, and it's owned by the adopted daughter Estella, and that, like, you know, they speak shortly, and like she is divorced from her abusive ex-husband, and he actually passed away in some sort of fight. So then, like, you know, she doesn't want to, she said that she thought of him at times, but like, you know, they say goodbye, and then the story is sort of open-ended, but like, you know, what's Pip gonna do, what's she gonna do? So it's sort of like a sad story in some ways. Life wasn't easy back then, but there are, like, you know, it's a story of redemption, and it sort of reminds me of like the story of the prodigal son in the New Testament of the Bible, of like, you know, he gets everything he wants, like, you know, riches and all this, and then sort of squanders it. It's like, okay, I'm not, and doesn't like know the value, the true value of it. But he learns over time, and then, like, you know, he's more humble when he's older. So it's definitely an interesting book. I got this from a former tenant that like he had, and he's like, oh, like, you know, he gave it to me, and I didn't read it, and it's been some years, but I saw on YouTube that the movie of this was put online, and I'm like, oh, huh, I actually have the book of that. So I was like, I'll go read the book, and I started reading it recently and finished it this evening. It took maybe like about 2 weeks ish. I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, I'd say about 2-ish weeks. So it's interesting to read the book. I'm gonna watch the movie, which I'm sure will be much shorter and not as elaborate as this. But in this picture of it, it's basically Pip and Estella walking around, and like he has great expectations of, like, you know, his life getting to be so much better, and it is in some ways, but like, you know, he learns, he's humbled. It's interesting. If you wouldn't want to read the book, I'd say see the movie. I'm gonna watch the movie probably over this weekend, see how it differentiates from the book. Well, thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment, like, share. See you in the next video.